Give me the Bible, star of gladness gleaming, to cheer the wanderer lone and tempest-tossed. No storms can hide that radiance peaceful beaming, since Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible when my heart is broken, when sin and grief have filled my soul with fear. Give me the precious words by Jesus spoken, hold up faith's lamp to show my Savior near. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible, all my steps enlighten, teach me the dangers of these realms below. That lamp of safety o'er the gloom shall brighten, that light alone the path of peace can show. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible, lamp of life immortal, hold up that splendor by the open grave. Show me the light from heaven's shining portals, show me the glory gilding Jordan's wave. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Break thou the bread of life, dear Lord, to me, as thou didst break the loaves beside the sea. Beyond the sacred page, I seek thee, Lord. My spirit pants for thee, O living word. Bless thou the truth, dear Lord, to me, as thou didst bless the bread by Galilee. Then shall all bondage cease, all fetters fall, and I shall find my peace, my all in all.
Good evening. Let's edify one another, shall we, as we prepare or we rejoin. I apologize for being tardy, but I cannot account for other people's, um, other businesses' busyness. Thank you. I had to stop at the store because Amy needed some stuff. And so there you have that. Um, there you go. Good. Anyhow, the two stores were pretty busy, so that's why I am late. And anyhow, so let's jump into this. Um, last week we began Genesis 19, and wow, nobody wants to join us. Let me check something here. Boom, 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 ba-do-ba-do-boo-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Shay's here. There. Add just that one in there, just in case that might get some people that we didn't get with the other ones. Okay, so back on track. Last week we began Genesis 19 as the two angels come to Sodom in the evening. Lot's sitting there. He rises to meet them. We talk about this briefly. I believe we left off in the middle of the chapter, did we not, CJ?
Let me look at the end of the last video.
Appreciate that. Well, while he does that, I'm going to just go ahead and kind of recap in case we didn't. So they come into Sodom, and we might have just got ready to begin chapter 19. Bring this a little bit this direction.
No, 1822.
So
Abraham was about to intercede for Sodom.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Okay. Well, there it is. There's the mark. Okay, so Genesis 18. Boy, I was hoping we were further along. Okay, so the men turned from there. Abraham still stood before the Lord, and so God sent his two messengers on further while he decides to speak with Abraham. And remember, Abraham was known as a prophet. He was also known as kind of a humble man. Remember when he when he went and rescued Sodom and Gomorrah and all the cities of the plain, including Lot, he didn't take anything from them except what his young men had eaten. And what we see here is Abraham drawing near to God, and as a friend is talking with God. Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? And he reminds the Lord in his first sally, if you will, that God is righteous. Here in verse 25, And it's not right that the righteous God, the righteous judge, should destroy the righteous with the wicked. And God, of course, knows this. God also knows that there's not 50 wicked or 50 righteous people in the whole town of Sodom, or amongst the two, amongst all the cities of the plain, there's not 50 righteous people. And what does that say for the cities of the plain, that there isn't 50 righteous people among them? That's pretty sad, isn't it? But he allows Abraham to set a precedent. And what's the precedent that we see here? First off, good evening, Heather. As we look here in Genesis chapter 18 and beginning in verses 22 and following, what we see, hello, Sister T, is that God, is approachable. When Abraham draws near to God and he talks with him, he says, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? God shows himself as an approachable God, not someone who is aloof. There's one theory of God, and I'm trying to remember now exactly what the name of it is, but essentially it is of a clockmaker. That God wound up created the universe, wound it up, and then set it in motion, and now just simply sits back in heaven and lets it happen and just watches and does nothing. That's not the God that we see here, is it? O'Shea says Lot chose a bad place to live, a bad neighborhood. True. We'll get to that in a bit there, O'Shea. Yes, I think that is deism, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. I'm like, I know the name of that theory. What is it?
And one of its big proponents actually was none other than Thomas Jefferson.
Is it deism or Taoism?
Deism.
Okay.
Deism believes that there is a God, but that he doesn't actively work in the world, and they don't know what God there is. That's also theism. I think that's theism. Anyway, it's deism. I believe it. I'm pretty sure it's deism. Taoism is something entirely different. That's a Middle Eastern religion, and that's spelled Taoism. Anyhow, totally different thing. That's for a religions class, and that's not what we're into right now. Totally different one. That's another topic, another day. Twinkle, twinkle in the eye. But we see that God is an approachable God because Abraham's able to approach him. And throughout the entirety of the book of the Bible, or of every book of the Bible, we see that God is an approachable God. Abraham then, in his sally, asks about 50 righteous people, and reminds God that, as a judge and the judge of the earth. So this is the first time that we see that God, the idea that God is the judge of all the earth, actually put into words. Now, the idea is carried over, or is implied in Genesis chapter 6 through 9 with the flood, because God comes down and judges the earth. There is the same idea again put forth in Genesis chapter 11 when we deal with the Tower of Babel. But here it is spelled out specifically in word. So by this time, Abraham is, or I should say, man knows that God is the judge of all the earth. And not just that he is the judge, but that he is a just judge. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? So the Lord, again, remember, he's an approachable God. He says, okay, if I find 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. And we see Abraham come through, and again, he dropped. And it is the case in the Middle Eastern culture that prevailed even to a degree to this day, that they love to barter and to haggle over prices. You don't go in and buy things outright. No. You got to go in and you have to haggle over the price, because that is a game to them. That is the fun of what they do. But Abraham here, in true fashion, and by the way, it's not synonymous with just the Middle Eastern culture, but it is also for many cultures over the world. We just have outgrown that and simply go, okay, this is what the price is, this is what it is, and no, I'm not going to take anything else. But Abraham applies that and says, well, okay, now I've overstepped myself, but since I've already undertaken to do this, and since I'm speaking on behalf of all these people, I who am, just but a man, but dust and ashes, let's say there's only 45, and so through the whole interchange, he continues to bargain God down to the point of where there's only 10. Abraham's not uppity. Abraham's not, he doesn't come across as one who is arrogant, but rather as one who knows his place and yet is a true intercessor. And it really, as you ponder this, in the grand scheme of the whole Bible, is it really any wonder then that as we look down the ages to the final seed of Abraham, that we see that he also is the great intercessor, interceding on behalf of all humanity. Yes, in a minuscule way. There are still people, even in America, for example, that do like to do the bartering, the bargaining. And in fact, there's a whole community, even on Craigslist and stuff, and Facebook, who prefer to do business that way. They don't do business with money per se, but rather they exchange goods. Okay, I've got this to trade for that. And they seek to trade up rather than trade down or trade straight across. So yes, a minuscule way to look at it. I mean, what goes on at a garage sale is a minuscule way of looking at what Abraham did with God. But not to detract from what I was making a point of. Is it any wonder then that his descendant, the one that was to bless all of humanity, is the great intercessor? It as we think of that, I mean, it kind of boggles the mind to look forward that far in the future and realize Abraham was just a shadow of Christ. Right. Abraham was just a shadow of Christ. And the ultimate conclusion of the conversation is that Abraham bargained God down to 10. If there were 10 righteous souls among all the cities of the plain, not just in Sodom, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. If not, I will know. So as the men turn from there to go towards Sodom, Abraham stands before the Lord and says, suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. This can mean either. I apologize. I've been saying in the cities of the plain, but it's actually within Sodom. God says right there. They couldn't even find 10 righteous souls. Not 10 in a city. And God goes his way, and Abraham goes back to his tent. So we turn to chapter 19. The two angels come to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Lot saw them. He rises to meet them, bows himself with his face to the earth. Now, this is a good number of years after the incident where Abraham had to run and save him. That occurrence took place in 14. That was prior to Ishmael, and Ishmael was 10 years before. Was 10 years before, or was it 10 years, or was it 14? Let me look. '86. So it was 14 years before Isaac. So this happened roughly 13 years after, at least a minimum of 13 years after the rescue. And probably more than that, but a minimum of 13 years. Ishmael's about 13 years old, because Abraham's 98, 90, almost about 99 years old, because he's still 99 when Isaac is born. The two angels come here. Lot, of course, should have still been a big person, because, I mean, after all, it was his uncle that rescued them. But as we can see, the fortunes of time are not always kind. Lot has not integrated himself very well within Sodom. He's sitting in the gate, which is where usually the prominent men of the city sit. And he invites these two men to turn aside and to come in under the shelter of his house. So we find that Lot is hospitable, rather like his uncle, is he not? But they were going to spend the night in the town square. They weren't. They were, generally all travelers were wont to stay. We think of, towns having, Super 8s and Motel 6s and Ramadas and Best Westerns and all these other hotel chains that are out there. But they didn't have those back then. No, they did have some inns that were usually taverns. They had boarding houses styles, but they typically depended upon the hospitality of strangers, or the central town square, if you will, which is where, a big open area where people could bed down, pitch their tent, put a bedroll, where there was water, and you could basically tie your horse or your mule or what have you. And that's where they were going to spend the night. But he urged them strongly. So again, here he doesn't want any ill to befall them. So he opens up his house, offering, and he urges them strenuously, strongly urges them. And so they go ahead and they cede to his wishes, and he makes them a feast, bakes unleavened bread. It's interesting that the Bible seems to go to big measures or big lengths to emphasize any time unleavened bread is utilized. And I'm not certain why that is. I can't say it. But when the Lord and his messengers came to Abraham just last chapter, we see Abraham making unleavened bread. Of course, if you make leavened bread, it takes time to bake. It's several hours. You're dealing with sourdough. So you're dealing with a little bit of starter. You got to sit there, let it rise. You got to let it sit on the thing. You got to knead it down. Then you got to let it rise again. Then you got to bake it. Unleavened bread was not the same case. It was a really quick, easy bread. You just simply mix flour and oil, a little bit of salt, and then you kneaded it together and rolled it into balls and let it rest while you started frying. Heated up your rock or heated up a skillet or whatever. And then you started frying. So it's very quick, it's easy, and it typically is the bread of the bread of essence, the bread of need. But they weren't allowed to have a peaceful night's rest because evidently they're the only strangers in town. Lot's house gets surrounded by all the men of Sodom, young and old. All the men surrounded the house. And we're not told how big the city is, but if you stop and if you think if it's any size, if it's 50 men and their families, if it's 70 men and their families, that's still a pretty big town or city for that day and age. Nineveh, by the time of Jonah, was a city that took 5 days to cross. I believe it was, yeah. And Jonah went through a 1 day's journey and then began to preach. Or was it 3 days to cross? Maybe it was 3 days to cross. That's how big it was. You could not walk across Nineveh in 1 day. It took you 3 days to cross. And if you figure, what is it? That'd be roughly, I'm trying to remember what the actual distance a person can walk at a steady pace is, at a leisurely pace. But I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 miles, 3 to 5 miles a day. That's still a pretty big town. I'd have to go look that. Oh well, I take that back. According to Google, you can walk about 20 to 30 miles a day. You walk at about 3.1 miles per hour if you're, let's see here. Oh wait, no, that's 20 to 30 miles. That's a trained walker. Hang on a minute. A fit person could potentially walk anywhere from 30 to 50 miles a day, depending on the factors. Average person 10 to 20 miles. So figure about. I think I'm going to be saying I'm right about 3 to 5 miles, 3 to 10 miles. So when you consider that,
I'm a half mile.
You're a half mile. Sam, good morning. So, I say all that to illustrate the fact that we're not told how big a city Sodom is, but it is known as a city of the plain. And this was not just a simple 5 or 10 people that were around Lot's house. We're dealing with a massive crowd, 50 plus. I'm, just all the people to the last man surrounded the house. There's a reason it's called a city. I wonder, does it give us it's really Ir or Ar or Ayar. It means a city, a place guarded by walking. Excitement, anguish, terror. What? A town, a city, town, a place of walking guarded. It's real defined. Can mean an encampment or a post, city, court, or town. So it really doesn't give us a good definition either. But we got a lot of men there, and um, they all surrounded the entire town, the entire uh, the entire city. Men surround the house, and they called a lot. Where are the men who came to unite? Bring them out, that we may know them. Um, this is not a sitting down in your recliner. Hey, what you do for a living? Where you from? How old are you? Type of a know you. This is, of course, as we all know, the know them in the carnal sense of the word. Lot goes out, and he says to the men at the entrance, shuts the door after him, and says, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly." Now, if obviously, if it was just a bonding situation where you are getting together over the Super Bowl, he wouldn't be saying, "Do not act so wickedly." And of course, that is further emphasized. That fact is further emphasized by the statement that comes next about him, about his two daughters who have not known any man. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. So Lot, being the hospitable host that he is, seeks to protect those guests of his. And no, I did not do that intentionally. But then most of my rhymes rarely ever are. And rather offers up his daughters so that they don't sin. Now, of course, rape would have been a sin anyway, but not as an egregious, evidently, a sin as homosexuality, according to the scriptures here. But they refused his offer. And they throw up his lack of integration. This fellow came to sojourn. He's now become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. And so they're going to, instead instead of the angels, they're going to latch into Lot. Whoops. That's not what I asked for. In 2 Peter chapter 2, we have this passage written about Lot. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. If by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what was going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority. What we have then is a towering pillar of compliment or witness as to for Lot. God calling him righteous, and that he was tormented in his soul over their lawless deeds. And now we also know one other thing. And by the way, that's Genesis 2 verse, or 2 Peter 2 verses 7 and 8. I want to show you this as well. Where do you suppose the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah came from?
That's a cool connection.
Lot was tormented in his soul. He tormented his righteous soul over their wicked or lawless deeds. He's crying out to God over their lawless deeds. He's tormented. Now, they says he's become the judge. Well, yeah. And I'm going to put this also in there. The same thing. We're going to tag that one. Oops. 2 Peter 2, verses 7 through 8. And what we have then is that, yes, he's the judge. He's a righteous individual tormented over their lawless deeds. And so then they're going to try to take care of the righteous judge. These are the righteous man who's been crying out to God. And so they're pressing against, they're gonna get him. And they're gonna get the guys that are behind him that he's trying to protect. They're pressing hard against the man. But the angels reach out their hands and bring Lot into the house, shut the door, and strike with blindness the men who are at the entrance of the house, both small and great. Now, what do you think that's going to do for the guys that are at the side of the house? Or those who are at the back of the house? You see, the text doesn't say they struck everybody with blindness, does it? And yet, just a few verses before, all the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. And so when the angel struck the men in front of the door, in front of the entrance, with blindness, it's going to cause some of them, a majority of them, to have second thoughts, right? Well, the men say to Lot, and so, I mean, not all of them are there, but some of them are. The man says to Lot, have you anyone else here, sons-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place. For we're about to destroy this place because of the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot goes out to his sons-in-law. Pause a moment and think about this. Lot goes to his sons-in-law. Now, I want to look at that. There's a difference in text between the ESV and the KJV and the ASV. Because here we have a past tense, who married his daughters. Anybody understand the difference between the two?
Was it a betrothal type situation?
That's what I'm checking to see. Because if it's an espousal, like Mary and Joseph, they were married but not married. In other words, they haven't there's 368 times. This is the word that is used in reference to Jacob going to take a wife or to marry a wife of the sons, of my kindred. Or wait, no, of Abraham sending to Padan Aram to have them have a wife taken for Isaac. Rather, the word take a wife, which we would know as to select, or to to select. It's also the word for take. When I take, I pray thee my blessing. So it's not always indicative of marriage. So that's in case of take, 368 times. Woof. Took, past tense. Taken, receive, received, fetch, bring, fetched, taketh, brought, get, married. 4 times it's used for married. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. And afterward Hetzron went in to the daughter of Machir, the father of Gilead, whom he married, in the past tense. So it looks like in the sense of it's either to get a wife, as in to marry a wife, or to have married. And I guess context would would determine whether it's past or it's present, or I mean, past or future. So Eleazar of Damascus was sent to Padan Aram to take a wife or select a wife for Isaac, whereas this one says, "Spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters." So context would be past. So I don't know how or why they decided to put were to marry, as if he only had to.
Yeah, if he's talking to his sons-in-laws, that means they've already married their wives. Or else they would not be his sons-in-laws.
And that's the thing, because that's where it gets kind of tricky, because Joseph and Mary were considered married, even though they were only espoused or promised, or the bride price had been paid, but they hadn't actually had committed the deed, if you will. Consummated the marriage, because it was prior to his taking her as his wife. They were espoused, but and this is really where some of the customs get really strange and weird. But essentially, once they were betrothed, they were considered married. Well, but we're never told that he only had 2 daughters, O'Shea, and we're never said how many sons-in-law he had. So I err on the side of caution, saying that that he had more than just 2 daughters. These were just 2 of his daughters that had not known. These were the last of his daughters. His 2 youngest daughters is what I read the text to say. And these here that he's going to are the ones that are have already married. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the 2 shall become one flesh. So here's one, and I'm going to throw one other wrinkle in your thinking as well. It is also a practice that in certain nations where when children are born, or within a certain time frame after children are born, that the parents will get together, will find a mate for their child, and will draw up documents and pay the dowry and bride price, if you will, and the 2 will essentially go through a pre-marriage marriage ceremony. And that means that they are married in that culture. Now, of course, they won't be able to finalize the marriage until they get of full marrying age, which would be, roughly about 12 to 15 years of old age for him, and about 11 to 13 years of age for her. But there you have it. So there is that aspect of it as well. Now, O'Shea, I'll get to that. Well, actually, let's answer that right here and there. Now, if his sons-in-law and extra daughters or older daughters, let's use my argument for the moment. If he has older daughters that are already married, and his sons-in-law did not leave Sodom and Gomorrah, hence his daughters did not leave Sodom and Gomorrah, then would not his previous or his older daughters and any grandchildren, if there were any, be wiped out? What that means when it says that Lot has no seed means he has no male heir. And if all he has is daughters, then he has no seed to carry on the family name. So they are true. They are correct in what they say, regardless. But if he has, if he had grandchildren via, older daughters, for example, they were wiped out because his sons-in-law did not leave with him. For he goes to his sons-in-law. Now, if they were to marry his daughter, if these were the ones that were espoused and had not yet taken his daughters, they did not leave because he seemed to be jesting. He was joking. He didn't seem to be serious. They thought he was just making fun. Additionally, I want to point out that where was his sons-in-law? Hold on, doing something real quick. With the other men of the city. Where were the other men of the city initially? At Lot's house. So originally his sons-in-law were surrounding his house trying to carnally know the two angels up until the point in time when the angel struck those at the entrance with blindness. How can I say that for sure? Well, simple. All the people to the last man. Hey, Skylar. That means that even Lot's sons-in-law, future sons-in-law, however you wish to read that, was at his house seeking to do wickedly to the men that were under the shelter of Lot's roof. However, once there were those who were struck with blindness, they left out of there. Because those who were at the entrance of the house, they were struck with blindness. And whether they were small or great, they were struck with blindness. And they wore themselves out groping for the door. They kept trying to find the door. They couldn't find the door. And his sons-in-law, well, they weren't trying to find the door. Of course, I might misunderstand that. Maybe his sons-in-law were still at his house, because after all, it does say that Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law. But one thing about it, didn't I put start here? I did. Okay, good. One thing about it, the message fell flat because the delivery of the messenger, either out of shock or what, we're not certain, but he seemed to be jesting. Whether it was the sons-in-law couldn't believe the message, they thought it was a joke. They thought they thought their father-in-law was just joking, or the delivery of the message was said in such a way as to appear that he was joking. Get out of this place. For the Lord's about to destroy the city. If you don't seem serious in your delivery, if you act like a madman, well, what do you think is going to happen? That's all the time we have for today. We'll pick up in verse 15 next week. Want to thank you again for joining us for another episode of Study to Show Ourselves Approved. We're seeking to be approved unto God, not unto man. Workmen that need not be ashamed, for we're rightly handling the word of God. Beginning at the beginning, our studies in Genesis. Hope and pray you have been edified. And also pray that you will continue to study to show yourselves approved. See you then. God bless in your walk with Him.